Hello. In today's video, I want to speak a bit about the response of those who associate themselves with the political left and the phenomenon of Islamism. Now, Islamism is basically defined as a political offshoot of Islam, the religion, ideological Islam, so to speak, in the sense that it's militant, politicized Islam. Um, And it's not directly the same thing as Islam, the religion. The majority of Muslims are not Islamists, but some are. And I do believe this is incompatible with democracy and all progressive societies. We're already seeing in Egypt what Mohammed Morsi has done with his sweeping decree. Um, He's basically just replacing Mubarak as the next dictator of Egypt. Anyway, this isn't about Egypt. This is about Islamism generally. Now, there's many criticisms, valid criticisms of Islamism, and indeed of Islam, the religion, but specifically Islamism. Um, One of those, well, there's so many. There's the terrorism that comes with it. And you might say not every Muslim is a terrorist, that's true, but many terrorists are Muslim. That's an indisputable fact. Not every terrorist group can be called Islamic. You have the drug cartels in Mexico have nothing to do with Islam and so on, but wherever you have Islamism, you have violence. That's a fact. Al-Qaeda is the most famous example, but there's other Islamist groups that have, if they haven't promoted violence, they've certainly promoted bigotry, whether that be against Jews or against homosexuals or against so-called kafirs. Kufers, I can't remember what the terminology is. They're both derogatory terms. One of them, I believe, was used in South Africa. The other one's a derogatory term for non-Muslims. I can't remember because I'm just speaking off the top of my head here. But I'd like to speak about the left's attitude to Islamism, because it's quite strange. Now, when I talk about the political left, I'm talking about liberals, socialists, people who can be defined as a political left. I'm a centrist myself, although I have some left-wing credentials. I regard myself as a centrist. I think there's a certain hypocrisy from the political left on this issue. Now, two of the things most important to leftist social ideology is women's rights and gay rights. Those are two very important things. They should be important to anyone who cares about human rights generally, but they are particularly important to the left. And this is peculiar because they seem to have put those issues aside to some extent when it comes to trying to get Islamic support or support from the Muslim community. And instead they've pandered to this phenomenon of so-called Islamophobia. Now, let me tell you what I think of Islamophobia. I believe it does exist to some extent. There are people who believe all Muslims are terrorists, who hate Muslims, and who have some pretty extreme views on Muslims. I mean, if you look at Anders Breivik, his terrible crime last year in Norway was motivated by genuine Islamophobia. But at the same time, I'm not so sure that the terminology is quite accurate, because a phobia is an irrational fear of something. Now, being wary of violent political Islamism is not irrational, it's common sense. And it's a simple cold hard fact, no matter what the PC Brigade would like to say otherwise. And a big problem I have with the left is whenever anyone raises the issue of Islamism, they will automatically accuse that person of being a member of the BNP, EDL, a Nazi, far right, etc., etc. I have contempt for the BNP. I don't trust the EDL, and I have friends from all backgrounds. And I have Muslim friends. I have no problem with Muslims as individuals. The religion I do have questions about. Muslims, I have no big problem with them. Most of them I find reasonably down-to-earth people, normal people. But I do have a problem with the left's attitude to this, and I do believe they've sold out in a way to try and get Muslim support. I think there's hypocrisy. That they're very quick to ridicule and mock and criticize Christianity, which is valid, but they seem a lot more hesitant to criticize and mock Islam. And I do wonder, is it a combination of fear? Because we know what happens every time Islam is challenged. There's usually violent riots. Um, so it could be a combination of fear. It could also be trying to, like what happened was when with the controversy over the invasion of Iraq, the left really used that as their number one issue, and as a result, they got a lot of Muslim support. Now, that was understandable because that was an immoral war, deeply counterproductive in my view. Um, but I believe organisations like the Stop the War Coalition are incredibly ignorant to the reality of Islamism. I mean, I've just read a case in Wales where it's an ongoing trial. A mother and father have been accused of beating a young boy to death because he did not recite his Quran passages properly. So he was beaten to death and burned. His body was burned. The woman claims that she's admitted using violence against the boy, but she claims her husband was abusive. Whatever the case is, it's obvious that they both were guilty of abusing this young boy, and it's despicable. And that is what will happen if we don't take the threat of Islamism seriously. And that is connected to Islamism because it's an example of certain aspects of the Muslim community believing that teachings of the Quran come before British values, i.e. human rights. And that is despicable. I do get frustrated that every time someone mentions this, they're accused of being a bigot or they're accused of being a fascist or something. I hate fascism. I have no connections with the far right. I had a Chinese girlfriend, so I don't think that would be fit their agenda. I hate the far right. This is not about the far right. It's about the far left being incredibly ignorant in terms of the reality that is a threat from political Islamism. And I don't believe Western European societies have taken this seriously enough. In Scandinavia especially, people have been frankly cowardly. Governments have been cowardly in taking this issue on. Because of a combination of overt sensitivity, fear, and this overused term Islamaphobia. I believe it exists. There is discrimination in some areas against Muslims, but it's not anywhere near as widespread as is being claimed. Because those people who push this word the hardest are the same people who believe that all criticism of Islam should be banned. That's extremist. What they're basically arguing is if you criticize Islam, you're an Islamophobe. Which is absurd. I think that's so this video basically I just like to challenge. Now I'm not saying all left-wing people are guilty of this. There are left-wingers who have stood up and said yeah, there is a problem with Islam and women's rights and gay rights and so on, but not enough of them have. I believe Stop the War Coalition is being hijacked by Islamists. I had moderate sympathy with them during the whole Iraq thing, but now I just think they're useful idiots. They're being used as puppets by various Islamist groups to further their agenda. So I've little time for the Stop the War Coalition, or Respect is another example. A party that may have some good points, but they'll never be in government. And basically, they're not a party for the British people, they're a party for the Muslim community. That's just a fact. They do not appeal to everyone. So I do believe the left is guilty of basically ignoring some of these facts and basically pandering to this idiocy that criticism of Islam amounts to Islamophobia. I define Islamophobia as hatred of Muslims, discrimination against Muslims. That's Islamophobia. Questioning Islam and recognizing the threat of Islamism for what it is not Islamophobia. It's common sense. Okay, that's all I really have to say on the subject for now. Okay.